Hello, federal employees. Again, it is so good to be here with you today. If you are new to this channel, to this podcast, please consider joining the community, subscribing, and being a part of the group here who are trying to get the most out of their benefits and their retirement and just getting better as people. That is what we're trying to do here. So if you are into that, please consider joining us and get ready for a great episode. If you're watching this close to when it comes out, it is going to be New Year's Eve of 2020. So I hope you are having a great holiday season. And I definitely did not record this on Christmas Eve. It was before, but I definitely want to make sure to stay on schedule to give you the information that you need to get the most out of your benefits and your retirement. So today is about FEGLI, or FEGLI, or Federal Employee Group Life Insurance, and how to get the most out of it. It is one of the largest group term life insurance programs in the world. And there's a lot of advantages that come with it as a federal employee, and you have access to it, of course, as a first federal employee. But there are times when it doesn't make sense anymore, where the cost outweighs the benefits, right? So today, my goal is to give you some of the information that you need to know, okay, when does it make sense and when does it not make sense? When should I opt in and when should I opt out? So there are three main things that you should consider when thinking about when it makes sense and when it doesn't make sense. So let's jump right in. So number one is pre-existing conditions. One huge perk about FEGLI, Federal Employee Group Life Insurance, is that as long as you get the coverage with a qualifying life event, and getting hired with the government is a qualifying life event, there are no medical exams. So you don't have to get the exam. You don't have to tell them that you have these pre-existing conditions. That's not going to affect your premiums. So if you have some underlying conditions that would make it very difficult for you to get coverage somewhere else on the private side, then FEGLI can be an incredible option because you can get the coverage that you need, and the cost when you're young is great. It's a great option. So that's the first thing. If you have underlying pre-existing conditions, this can be a great option, especially as you get older and maybe things get worse. It can be a great option to get the coverage that you need. Now, before I jump into number two of the things that you need to consider when deciding if FEGLI makes sense for you, is before you actually consider any of these things, is you have to figure out for you, what coverage do you need? Do you need life insurance? And if you do, how much? Some people might have you believe that everyone needs life insurance, and that's not the case. It's not the case. A lot of people do, or a lot of people should, but not everyone. There are some situations, for example, if someone is single, maybe they have no debts, no mortgage, no kids, not a ton of commitments, and if they passed away, they have enough savings to cover all the miscellaneous things that come with that. Well, maybe it's say, hey, maybe you don't need it. I don't know. You have to look at your situation to say, for me, if I was to pass away, am I going to leave a mess for the people that I'm leaving behind? That's the question, right? And if the answer is yes, you may need some life insurance to help fill in the gaps to make sure that your family can maintain their standard of living and live in the same way that they did when you were around. So I wanted to add that in so that you ask that question first. So you asked, hey, do I actually need this before I think about where to get it? Okay, so back into the list of three things that you need to consider. So now we're on number two. And number two is the cost. With life insurance and insurance in general, cost is huge. Obviously, you want it from a good company. Obviously, you want it to be a good policy. But above and beyond those, you want the cost to make sense for you, okay? And with FEGLI, there's some nuances there. When you're young, the cost of premiums is actually very competitive. But as you age, as you get into your late 40s, your 50s, 60s, the cost of premiums get very expensive. If you have read or will read my article on this topic, I walk through how it changes during the time, and it doubles and triples in your 50s and 60s. So you definitely want to watch that cost. Now, if you have pre-existing conditions, it still might be a great deal. I don't know. But for you, if you're in good health and you're starting to be in your 40s, your 50s, 60s, definitely shop around. Look at what other options there are, because there's no point in overpaying for insurance that you can get somewhere else, and you could save that money for retirement or anything else that you want in life. Insurance is great, but we don't live for insurance, right? We want to use our money to live the life that we want, and saving money on insurance is a great way to fund the things that we actually care about. Obviously, you want enough insurance, but you don't want to overpay for it if you don't have to. So that is number 2. Number 3, the last thing that you want to consider when thinking about whether to use FEGLI or not is if you want to get a little more creative with your insurance, right? FEGLI hasn't changed for decades. It just hasn't changed much. It's very simple. If you pass away, your beneficiaries get a lump sum. With other coverages on the private side, you can often weave other things in. For example, some policies on the private side allow if you, for example, have a life-threatening disease, but then are treated and you survive. Some policies will still give you a benefit. They'll still pay out because they know that your life has changed and you may need that money, right? And so there's different ways to cover different types of risks. Nowadays, the medical field, medical professionals, technology is getting very, very good. And they are getting good at treating things. So what if you don't pass away? What about then? Are you going to be in an okay financial position? These are some of the things that you might want to think about. Now, it's not always worth it to get one of these policies. It depends on your situation. With FEGLI, you don't have those options. On the private side, there's more nuances and more options to say, hey, I want to cover this risk, but I also want to cover this risk. And maybe you could do that with a single policy that happens to be life insurance as well. So those are the 3 things. If you have pre-existing conditions, it might make sense for you. If the cost makes sense for you when you're young, maybe. As well as definitely look at if you want to get more creative with your policy, your insurance. Now, before I leave you, let me make this clarification. FEGLI is not just one type of insurance. It's a number of different types. There's basic and there's option B. These are the 2 I'm going to touch on. There's more. These are the 2 that I'm going to touch on. During this whole video, I have been talking about option B. This is the coverage where you can get up to 5 times your salary. And when you think of traditional getting life insurance through the federal government, this is what most people talk about. Or the basic option that you get just by default by being a federal employee, you do pay a portion of it, but your agency does as well. That portion actually doesn't increase. The premiums don't increase over time. So that's something different. And some people do want to keep that a lot longer than they want to keep option B. So make sure you understand some of the nuances and some of the differences there. But today I was focused on option B, because when most people are asking about this is what they're talking about. And if you have coverage with the federal government that is up to 5 times your salary, either 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 times your salary, this is probably what you're talking about. But I just wanted to make sure to give you the information that you need to say, hey, maybe you're 45, maybe you're 50, maybe you're getting right in that age where you may want to start shopping. Hopefully this is helpful to say, hey, for me, do I want to stay in the program or do I want to get out? Do I want to shop around or does it still make the most sense for me, right? These are the sort of questions that really can make a huge difference in your life by always reevaluating and say, hey, this made sense last year, but this year, where am I at? What are the new options? What are the changes? And what makes sense for me? If you continually go through this process with not just your life insurance, but with every area of your financial life and life in general, then over time, your situation is going to improve so much because you're constantly tweaking, making adjustments to make sure that things still make sense for you. So I hope this was helpful. Have a great rest of your holiday season and rest of your week, and I will see you next time.